How does sign language intersect with theater? Sign language is a physical language of gestures and signs, used mostly by those who are deaf or hard of hearing. There are many different sign languages based on the country and region it comes from, including British Sign Language, Chinese Sign Language, Brazilian Sign Language, and, of course, American Sign Language. ASL interpretation, alongside all other forms of sign language interpretation, is just a way of translating spoken language for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. If you've ever seen a public speaker give an address on live television, you've likely seen a professional ASL interpreter standing right by their side, translating the contents of the speech in real time. Anyone who knows sign language can act as an interpreter, but only those with specific training and licensure can become official interpreters for live events such as press meetings, organizational conventions, and live theater. But how does theatrical interpretation work? How is it different from other kinds of sign language interpretation? And how can you try to make it part of your theater's accessibility mission?
Hi, I'm Julia Peterson, and welcome back to Access Design with Global Hive. Today we're going to be talking about sign language interpretation, which is an accessibility tactic I'm sure many of you have heard of, but maybe don't know a lot about.
Sign language interpreters are highly skilled individuals to start with, but theatrical interpreters have an extra level of responsibility. Alongside being translators, they're performers in their own right, choosing the most accurate way to adapt dialogue and using movement and expression to project the emotions and intent of the character they're speaking for. There are two types of sign language interpretation in theater. Regular interpretation, in which the interpreters are placed usually in a specific spot near the front of the stage with the best visibility for deaf audience members, and shadow interpretation. Shadow interpreters are when the sign language interpreter essentially follows their character on stage, acting as their shadow and directly performing in the show. A great example of this would be Deaf West Theater's production of Spring Awakening, in which every character in the show had their own shadow interpreter who acted both as a translator and an extension of their character's inner feelings. All forms of theatrical sign language interpretation take a lot of planning, resources, and training, but it is ultimately worth it to create a show that is accessible to the widest range of people possible. Here to talk about some of that planning is Havla Grace, a freelance ASL interpreter and ASL interpretation coordinator for theatrical and performance events in the Chicago area. While they still sometimes work as an interpreter themselves, these days Havla is mostly working with theater companies to hire interpreters and encourage ASL interpretation as an affordable option for any theater.
There's a lot of things that go into kind of doing a show, and I talked a little bit about, casting the show. I think casting the show is really important because you want, obviously, kind of the skills of the interpreter to match the skills of the actor, maybe make sure that they're able, interpreters in a lot of ways are very similar to actors. You want to match the person you're interpreting a little bit so the deaf or hearing audience understands the intentions and the attitude of the person. The first thing that you want to do when you're looking at the show is kind of look over the script. I always work with what we call an ASL master, and so that's somebody who is deaf who will work with the interpreting team. And we sit down and we look over the script and we decide how many interpreters might be needed for the show. And that typically, a traditional show is just two interpreters. And that's if your show traditionally has two people talking to each other and maybe a third character who comes in. But if there is a lot of overlapping dialogue, if you have a show where there's like 5 people constantly talking to each other, there's no way that you can have only 2 interpreters. So normally I have an ASL master and then 2 interpreters. So our team is 3 people, where the interpreters will work with the ASL master to make sure that their signs are as accurate as possible, as they're clear as possible. So you have a native signer helping make the show basically as best as it can be. It's really great to have if you're only going to have one ASL interpreter performance, to put it at the end of near the end of the run. So the interpreting team has more time to rehearse. Accessibility should be budgeted in just the way any other design. If you're paying a costumer money, you're paying a lighting designer's money, then you should have in your budget money for accessibility as well.
I'm Julie Peterson, and this has been Access Design with Global Hive. Thank you so much to Havilah Grace for their wonderful interview and all the information they provided us. I'll be leaving a couple links down in the description to some of the resources they gave me, so make sure to check those out. Make sure to check out Global Hive Labs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or on our website at globalhivelabs.org for more of our exciting upcoming projects and news on accessibility. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.